I am really delighted to introduce this young man, somebody that I have known for many years, and he has quite a story to tell. And thanks, Dave. So our next session is by Nick Prefontaine, and Nick comes to us from Newport, Rhode Island. He is a best-selling author and was named the top motivational speaker of 2022 in Yahoo Magazine. He's the founder and CEO of Common Gold. And just a couple of comments, and I'm sure he's going to talk more about this, but when Nick was in 8th grade as a youngster, he suffered a major injury snowboarding. And in fact, the doctors told his parents that he would probably wouldn't be able to walk, talk, or even eat on his own ever again. So Nick has developed this program that he has labeled the STEP program. And he's going to talk to us about that and walk us through it. So, Nick.
When I had to learn how to walk again at the age of 14, I had no idea that the first step I took was not with my feet, but with my mind. Making the decision to take one step was my first step. I had no memory or recollection of how I used to do things. Things like taking a shower had been erased from my memory, and I literally had to be taught that the water came before the soap. When learning how to walk again, my first steps wouldn't come until at least a month after my accident. The most important thing here, however, was that I did something, no matter how small it was. I took my first step without knowing it was my most important. On a February afternoon, my friends and I had just got to one of our most exciting days of the week, ski club. On our first run, the chairlift went right over the train park where all of the jumps were. I knew as soon as I saw it that I had to go off the biggest jump in the train park. There wasn't even a moment of thinking, should I do it? Or maybe I shouldn't. I knew that was what I was doing. It was almost a foregone conclusion. In my mind, I was thinking about what we would do after I landed that huge trick. Maybe grab a burger and fries in the lodge, or we could head over to the other chairlift for some runs on those trails. I was just happy to be there finally. I got to the top, buckled into my snowboard, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and confidently charged towards that jump with all my speed. Going out to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard on the snow, and that's the last thing that I remember. Due to the severity of my injuries, they wanted to bring a helicopter to the mountain to rush me to the hospital. They couldn't because it was too windy, so they sent in an ambulance. Out of the 6 paramedics, there was only one who could intubate on the spot, and I needed that to be able to breathe. He was one of the paramedics that showed up to the mountain that day. There are still several things that I can't explain because of the accident. And now I know one of them is the reason why I'm here with you today. No matter the severity of your crisis, the decision you make to take action is your first step. Something else I learned was that my goggles were the only protection that my head had. They told me that with each subsequent hit after the initial impact, my goggles mysteriously moved to cushion each blow as I rolled down the mountain. I wore some pretty big goggles with a lot of padding. I never would have fathomed that I would need them to brace my fall. The school had to get in touch with my parents and have them meet me at the hospital. All they knew was that I had been in an accident. My dad was the one that they were able to reach first. When he called my mom, he wasn't able to get her live, so he had to leave a message. As soon as he hung up, he worried that the message would panic her, so he called back and deleted it. When they both got to the hospital, they were totally shocked to see how rough of a shape I was in. My head and shoulder, where I made the initial impact, were bruised beyond comprehension. The doctors had to drill a hole for a shunt to be inserted into my brain to relieve the pressure. Without it, the pressure could have gone up and I would have died. At this point, I was off the count, but I can only imagine what it must have looked like to see a doctor standing over me, foot on my chest, while he was drilling the hole into my head. After that point, I was resting in a partially induced coma, unable to communicate with anyone in the intensive care unit. Each time the doctors would come into my room to share progress updates on how I was doing, my parents would usher them out of the room. They knew that even though I was in a coma, I was still taking in information. Especially in the early stages, these updates from the doctors were not very positive. They had to give them the worst case scenario. Once out of the room, the doctors told my parents that I probably wouldn't be able to walk, talk, or eat on my own ever again. Even if I was able to come out of my coma, there was a good chance that I would need 24-hour care for the rest of my life. They didn't accept this, like so many patients do, as a death sentence. They took the information, thanked the doctors, and allowed me to treat it like any other situation. This was no different than any other challenge that I had faced up to this point in my life. I really didn't see the difference. As soon as I was aware of my surroundings and the work that was left in front of me, I treated it like any other situation. I got up, did the best that I could, and I kept getting better every day. This support was instrumental in laying the foundation for the rest of my recovery. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was starting to use the very framework that would help me to overcome and achieve any obstacle throughout my life. We're so fortunate at Common Goal to be able to share this with the rest of the world. That is the STEP system. STEP is an acronym that we created and I unknowingly used. Let's start with the S, which stands for support. Support. Make sure that you have the support of your family and friends. This frees up so much of your mental energy to focus on accomplishing your objective. It might sound overly simplistic, but this very act of getting everyone aboard at the start can save you hours and hours of actual time, worry, and frustration in the future. You're going to want to have an advocate. There has to be someone in your life that you can rely on to be your advocate. For me, it was my parents, given that I was 14 years old. It doesn't matter how old you are, and that advocate doesn't have to be your parents. It can be a close friend that you share everything with. It can be your partner, husband, wife, or spouse. It's different for everyone, just like everyone is different. Reach out and share what's happening in your life. By reaching out and sharing the intimate details of what you're going through, you will open the doors to community support. Your advocate can help organize all of your doctors and therapists with a common goal. Schedule weekly meetings to keep everyone pulling in the same direction. The purpose of these meetings is to share your common goal and have each one of them report on how they're helping you get there. It's accountability. If they know that they're going to be meeting with you on Fridays, then they want to accomplish what they said they were going to. This will fast forward the doctor's and the therapist's plan for you. To give you an idea, our common goal was for me to run out of the hospital. This is where having a team becomes so important. Once you have that support, and it can be 1 or 10, it doesn't matter, make sure that you always have someone with you. This helps so much because without it, your mind has a possibility to play tricks on you and be negative. You could have your advocate and your team in place, but if you're not willing to receive the support, it will all be for nothing. Believe it or not, the support is there even if you don't see it. It's okay to receive help at different points in your life. In fact, we all help one another, and that's one of the beauties of being alive. The times that you feel that you don't need the support are often the times that you need it the most. Your advocate can get help from the rest of your team to place positive affirmations around you. Positive affirmations around your room always supports growth. After I got in my accident, my parents had affirmations all over my hospital room. Picture it. The only time I wasn't in therapy or meeting with doctors, I was in my room. At least in the early stages, it wasn't like I could get up and walk out of the room. One of my affirmations was, with each step I take, I am getting closer and closer to accomplishing my goal. They made a decision for me that I was going to have a positive mindset before I could make it for myself. This is something that your advocate can do for you early on in the process. Even if you didn't have a supportive family growing up, you can still build a foundation from any point in your life. There was a short period when I came out of my coma in the ICU. I had my eyes open. I know because I've seen videos of myself there. I've gone back and visited the ICU since. Although I can't consciously remember being there, everything looks so familiar. Everything from the layout of the floor in the rooms right down to the faces of the doctors and nurses. I feel like I know them and have been there before, but I just can't seem to put my finger on it. After a month, I was transported to a rehab hospital in Boston. Initially, I resided on the 3rd floor, which was reserved for the most critical of cases. I hardly have any memory of being on the 3rd floor, and that's because they were in the process of taking me off of all the drugs and medication from a partially induced coma. I still had a long road to go. The most that I could do was sit up in bed, supported by 3 nurses, for only 8 minutes at a time. After that, I was sweating like I had just ran 6 miles. Although these nurses probably didn't appreciate me sweating all over them in these 8 minutes, this was one of my first steps. I didn't cling to my suffering. I chose not to look at the end result, which was the medically driven, inevitable outcome that could have catapulted me into overwhelm. By that, I mean an overwhelm of machines, doctors, what-ifs, plans, and catastrophic thinking. I had lost all control of the situation in front of me. Much like we can't control the hand that we're dealt. We can't control getting into an accident, the death of a loved one, being physically or sexually abused as a kid, but we can control what our next step is going to be. The times that we don't take any steps is where we get stuck. We become paralyzed. Instead, I looked at the present moment in front of me and took 1 step at a time. I kept taking the next step and the next, and less than 60 days later, I ran out of the hospital. Not a big deal, but since then I've run 2 half marathons, a 10-mile race, and a 10K, where I shaved 30 seconds off my per mile time. The next letter in the STEP system is T, and that stands for trust. Trust that the next step will make itself available to you once you take your first step. This also starts by trusting yourself. Trust that you have this desire or calling inside of you for a reason. Follow it. There are a few key elements of trust that I'd like to highlight. None more important than having blind faith. You have to take everyone at their word. When I was learning how to walk, talk, and eat again, I listened. I followed everything that the doctors and therapists told me to do without questioning, is this really going to work? Or shouldn't I do it another way? Then I started to become addicted to the progress that I was making, and I asked for more. What else can I do that will fast forward me toward our common goal? Secondly, trust me in being in integrity. You have to do what you say and say what you do. Say what you'll do. No exceptions. This isn't going to be all sunshine and rainbows. This is going to be work, and it'll be worth it once you make it through to the other side. I didn't have a word for this during my recovery, but this is very important. If I agreed to anything that they asked me to do, I followed it through to completion. If I said I was going to do extra exercises, I did them. You need to let go of all expectations. Focusing on minute by minute, hour by hour, and day by day helps eliminate overwhelm and allows you to implement the STEP system. I didn't have a word for this during my recovery, but this is very important. If I agreed to anything that they asked me to do, I followed it through to completion. If I said I was going to do extra exercises, I did them. I did the work without an expectation of an immediate result. STEP. I was consistent in how I showed up. STEP. I stayed in the present moment and celebrated daily achievements, no matter how small. STEP. By continuing to move forward every day towards my recovery, I was building an unstoppable momentum. When I was in the hospital, I saw that there were so many kids who didn't have the support that I had. They didn't have an advocate with them at all times, so their minds could easily fall into being a victim of circumstance. Without a consistent diet of positive reinforcement in our lives, our minds can easily fall into playing the victim. Part of what helped me run out of the hospital was the support that I received from my family. When I first got into the accident, my parents had a very specific goal in mind, and that was for me to make a full recovery. While I was in the coma, they had already set the wheels in motion for the rest of my recovery. Initially, and for the next 85 days, I always had someone with me. My mom was with me during the day, going to every therapy and doctor's appointment with me. To help support her, my grandparents would also come in to support her and spend days with me. One of the things that my grandparents and I, her parents, always used to like to do was they would take me down to lunch. Early on in my recovery, my grandfather picked up on the fact that I really wasn't laughing, I wasn't smiling, and I wasn't being my old self. He brought me in a gift that day, early on in my recovery. I was still in a wheelchair, I still wasn't talking, and that gift he thought was really going to help me lighten up into being my old self. And it's something that we all point to that was very critical in my recovery. As I said, my grandparents and I would always love to go to lunch. At the hospital, the cafeteria was in the basement. So to get there, you took the elevator. You took the elevator all the way down, and then you had to go down this long hallway. I can picture it now. My grandmother was pushing the wheelchair, and my grandfather and I thought it would be a great idea to stash the gift that he gave me, the fart machine, right in the wheelchair. We waited until we passed by a doctor. They couldn't believe it. They thought it was my grandmother. Back up on the unit, there was this boy named Brian. Now, Brian and I befriended Brian, became friends with Brian. Brian and I would always play video games. And it always used to really make me angry that he would always beat me every single time at video games. Not for the reason that you think that I was angry. You see, Brian was 6 years younger than me. So most people would say, oh, okay, you're 14, someone that's 8 years old that beats you, that's a pretty big deal. That wasn't the reason. Brian had lost the use of his hands and his arms through a birth defect. So anything that you and I, would do with our hands and our arms, he would do with his feet. So every time he was beating me at video games with his feet. That day that my grandfather, Grandpa I called him, gave me the fart machine, after I played Brian at video games and he beat me yet again, his team of doctors and therapists came over to have a serious discussion and discuss his next steps for his treatment. After he beat me yet again, I slipped the fart machine right in his wheelchair. Now I waited until they got 15 feet away. They were settled. You should have seen Brian's reaction. Nick, what'd you do? Where'd you put it? I swear I'm going to get you for this. And that's something that we laughed about for weeks, if not months after that. And it really helped bring light to an unfortunate situation that we were all kids in a rehab hospital in Boston, all going through various stages of our recovery. Later on that day, now the nurses would come around to all the rooms to freshen up all the medications and make the beds and make sure everything was in order. In between my therapies, later that afternoon when my grandfather gave me the fart machine, I can remember it like it was yesterday. I was sitting in my wheelchair, my back to the windows, because I was in the front of the building. So I was looking back into my room, and I could see the bed, my bed, then there was a bathroom, then the hallway. As the nurse was coming around making my bed, right in front of me, coming around the corner, as she bent over, I swear, I tortured these poor nurses. They were probably happy to see me go. That was during the day. Now, my dad would come in and he would spend nights with me. On the times that my dad couldn't be there because he was traveling for work, I had uncles and my grandfather, his father, who I called Bub, would come in and spend nights with me. Now, quick story, I can't let this moment pass without saying this. So, why I call him Bub? I was the first grandkid, the first grandchild to be born, and his name is Bob, if you haven't figured out. And they asked him, what do you want the grandkids to call you? And he said, Bob. Well, as a kid, as a toddler, I wasn't really able to say Bob, so what came out was Bub. And I still call him Bub to this day. Bub had driven down to spend the night with me from their house in Maine, an hour and a half away, after working a full day. Now, I want to take a little survey and ask a question. So, how many of you in the audience snore? Okay. Not sure if I'm getting full truth on that. So, what about your spouse is someone that snores? Oh, okay. So, thank you. Thank you for that. Now, you spouses out there, I have a question. Once you're up, you wake up during the middle of the night from the snoring, is it something that dies down, it gets quieter and quieter and quieter, or is it something that builds and builds and builds and just gets louder until you can't even think anymore? The louder, yeah, louder and louder. So you can probably see where I'm going here. Bob is one of those lucky individuals, about 30% judging by the room, who snore. After Bob had a long day at work and he had driven an hour and a half from Maine, he came to spend the night. We did have a great night. It was awesome to see him, as always, and he would spend usually a couple nights a week. Whenever anyone would stay with me, whether it was my dad, an uncle, my grandfather Bob, they would always stay in a cot next to my bed. That's where they would sleep. At this time, it was very early on in my recovery, I didn't have a voice. I didn't have a voice at all. So the only thing I could do was a whisper. So I was in bed, I was woken up, and I said, Bob, 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 and he wouldn't wake up. When I got in my accident, I was 160 pounds, and I had gone down because I was in a coma for basically a month. I had lost a lot of weight, so I had gone down to 137 pounds. Still, I had enough strength, even though I didn't have a voice, to reach over, grab a pillow, and throw it at Bob. Bob woke up, and he goes, Nick, what's wrong? Are you okay? I said, yeah, Bob, I'm fine, but you're snoring. I can't sleep. And luckily, I was able to fall asleep before Bob that night. One of the other people that would come down is my dad's brother, my Uncle T. My Uncle T, who I actually just saw last night, a couple nights ago, by the way, and I only see him a few times a year, so that was great. We share an affinity for cars. So when I got in my accident, he had a 2002 Dodge Ram, brand new. Now, the 2002 model of the Dodge Ram only had a single outlet exhaust. He had done custom dual cherry bomb exhaust, and I begged him. Now, inpatient rehab, it's not like prison, but you're not really supposed to leave whenever you want either. So I begged him, I pleaded with him to please, please, please take me out to the back parking lot so I can listen to his truck. After several hours of me pleading, he did take me out, and I was able to hear him start up that truck. Oh my gosh. This was my support in action, and was one of the key ingredients to me not only making a full recovery, but running out of the hospital. As I mentioned, I saw when I was in the hospital that there were so many kids that didn't have the support that I had. They didn't have an advocate with them at all times, so their minds could easily fall into being a victim of circumstance. It's human nature. My parents would share updates with all my friends, their families, and teachers who were always asking about me. At first, when I was in the ICU, the only people that could see me was my family. It was important that my family kept an open line of communication to my friends, families, and teachers because this opened the doors to community support. It allowed the community to rally around me and visit as soon as they were allowed to. Having my friends come see me was something I really looked forward to. It really lifted me up. I was starting from scratch. To give you an idea, after I came out of the coma, they asked me if I had a brother or a sister. Brother, I said. I didn't have one then, and I still don't have a brother. I have a younger sister that I'd apparently forgotten after the accident. Try as I might, I was never able to convince my parents to bring me that brother that I imagined. They were done after 2, they said. No more. Like one of my affirmations said, with each step I took, I was getting closer and closer to accomplishing my goal. A big reason for this was I trusted that what the therapist told me to do was going to work. I had blind faith in them and in myself. This was the only choice that I had. It was also one of the first decisions that I made. STEP. The next letter in the STEP system is E, and that stands for energy. Energy is one of my favorites to talk about, and that's because it is something that I focus on to this day. Energy. Maintaining your energy allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. We are all born with an innate knowing inside us that keeps us healthy. Medication has the potential to get in the way of that. Obviously within reason here. That first night in the hospital cost $250,000. If it wasn't for modern medicine, I wouldn't be here today. However, there was a use, time, and place for everything. A month after my accident, when I came out of the ICU was a time that we needed to allow the body to heal itself. You can invest in and commit to your energy with these types of therapies: meditation, qigong, mental health and wellness, Reiki, massage therapy, acupuncture, or other natural treatments, exercise, and recovery. This has already been touched on briefly, but I want, so a little active participation here. I want everyone to go through that list and pick out one that you're not currently doing that you're going to commit to incorporating into your life. I'll review them again: meditation, qigong, mental health and wellness, Reiki, massage therapy, acupuncture, or other natural treatments, exercise, and recovery. My parents had someone come in and perform Reiki on me. The hospital said no one had ever done that. After coming out of the coma, my parents wanted to get me off of the medication as soon as possible. They knew with the body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. This is impossible if you are constantly on medication. Unless it was absolutely critical to my survival, they opted not to have me on any medicine. Focusing on your energy, it's so important. It's paramount. All throughout my life, I've utilized this type of system. Still, I was unaware of it. I've been unaware of it my entire life. After running out of the hospital, it wasn't like my work was done. I had to continue to go to outpatient therapy for another 6 months, along with being tutored all summer long, 5 days a week, in order to continue on to high school with the rest of my classmates. Looking back on it, it's a little surreal that only 18 months later, I was knocking on the doors of some distressed sellers that hadn't paid their mortgage in months, sometimes years. My job was to book meetings for our investor to meet with them about potentially buying their home. Looking back on it, I can see that this was part of my recovery. Going door to door, helping people out of their unfortunate situation. Focusing on your energy, something that is within your complete control. Just like the final letter in the STEP system, P for persistence. Without persistence, all the progress that you made up until this point will be fleeting. Persistence. Once you've taken your first step, keep getting up every day and taking your next step, no matter how small. By continuing to move forward every day, you are building an unstoppable momentum. Persistence is a mindset. Some mindset tips for persistence include being unsatisfied with the mediocre, making conscious decisions to keep moving forward, keep showing up no matter what. When moments of doubt creep in, take a deep breath. All throughout my life, I've utilized the STEP system. Still unaware of it, in 2012, I developed a voice issue. I just knew something wasn't right with my voice as the summer wound down. I can remember being out to dinner, just my mom and I. Maybe someone had said something to me prior, but I just wasn't ready to hear it. She noticed that my voice sounded different. I remember brushing it off because I didn't want to accept it. This is the first step that I missed taking. Now, what caused this? You're supposed to chant your scripts before you get on the phone to prospect for new business. I use the term chant here as a bit of tongue-in-cheek because that's what you're supposed to do. I like to take everything to the extreme. That's who I am as a person. Trust me, I'm working on it. I interpret that as, oh, okay, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to scream through my scripts. Not only will this get my energy up, but it will really reinforce the scripts so I know them in my bones. Thought I found the secret to closing more deals as a realtor. Then came Columbus Day 2012, when I really noticed him. My desk faced some glass that looked out onto the rest of the office. I would scream the script 3 times before getting on the phone to prospect, and on the 3rd time, my voice gave out, and I started laughing. I caught my reflection in the glass of that office, working on my own on a holiday. I thought, that's it. That's why my voice sounds different. From then on, I stopped the screaming of my scripts, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. Columbus Day was October 8th, 2012. By the end of October, my voice wasn't coming back. I had previously seen my general physician who examined me and gave me a full physical. Step 1. All my vital signs were good, and he didn't say anything wrong with me. He recommended that I see an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Step 2. My dad went with me when I saw this doctor. Oh, my God, this guy has such a terrible bedside manner. Wow, you don't see that every day. In fact, I've only seen a few in my life. I think that's a very rare voice condition, and you best be sure going right to the specialist in Boston and start getting Botox injections into your throat to relieve the tension. Whoa! I thought, I'm going to go to Boston to get Botox in my throat? That's such a big deal. It's a huge step. So I didn't go. I reasoned that we were just coming up to the holidays, and look, I would take a break from prospecting and being on the phone until January 1st. Surely by getting all that rest, my voice would go back to normal. I also did something else that I was familiar with. Speech therapy on my own at a local hospital. Step 3. I had to learn how to talk again once. Why couldn't I do it again? I relied on what I knew had worked for me in the past. Taking one step at a time eliminates the overwhelm of how am I going to do this, and reframes it so that you have ease and effortless living until you reach your goal. I had an appointment with that local speech therapist who gave me voice exercises that I was to do every day. If she told me I was to do them twice a day, I was doing them 4 times a day. Remember, I'm working on it. I started out seeing her once a week. Then it was twice a week. By April 2013, I was seeing her 3 to 4 times a week. The exercises helped and gave me strategies for dealing with the issue, but nothing I ever did was really fixing it. I could have stopped here and given up. However, this practice of one step at a time is what I know to be the solution to all of life's problems. I had a final appointment with them in May of 2013. They said that they have tried everything that they can think of, given me every technique, every strategy, every exercise, and at this point, the only thing that they could recommend is that I go and see the voice specialist in Boston. I finally gave in and scheduled an appointment with him. Dr. Philip Song. No, I'm not making that up. The voice specialist's name is Dr. Song. My appointment was to the beginning of August 2013. For the past year, I had built up what a monumental thing going to Boston was. I was blown away when Dr. Song walked into the room, heard me speak, and right away nonchalantly said, "Oh, that? Yeah, we deal with that all the time. We'll get it fixed in no time. Go see the front desk and schedule a Botox injection in a couple weeks." shocked. I was sold hook, line, and sinker. I got scheduled, and for the next 7 years, I received Botox injections. For my first injection, I had built up what a big deal this was in my head and sat down. Dr. Song said, tilt your head back and ask you to breathe in. I should feel a pinch. A very little pinch, and 3 seconds later, Dr. Song said, all set. See the front desk and schedule an appointment with one of our voice therapists in a couple weeks. I walked out of there in absolute awe. Here I had built this up in my head as major surgery for the past year, and all it was a little pinch. Are you kidding me? I now had to work with his team to break down those layers of muscle and retrain myself to speak again. You see, those 6 months of screaming through my scripts had annihilated the muscles in my throat, and new ones had grown back over the course of a year as my body's response to deal with that. I now had to work with Dr. Song's team to break down those layers of muscle and retrain myself to speak again. If anyone had ever told me that you have to do something for 7 years, this would have been completely overwhelming. However, because I took one step at a time, I now have my voice back for the second time. It was at this point that I knew I had a message and a strategy to be able to share with the world. All throughout my life, I've unknowingly been drawn, unconsciously been drawn to people that are in the midst of their own trauma or crisis. The common goal, always to help them get through to the other side and to be able to thrive with the rest of their life. And that is where our company, Common Goal, was born from. What if all life, thank you, was a series of next steps? How much more effortless and stress-free would life be if all you had to think about every day was just taking your next step? There is so much overwhelm in the world. This crisis fatigue can cause feelings of exhaustion, anger, despondency, fear, and even send us into analysis paralysis, preventing us from moving forward and into a life beyond our wildest dreams. The beauty is that you don't need me or anyone at Common Goal to use this life-saving strategy. Go to nickprefontaine.com/step to download the STEP system for free today. Think about where you are stuck, challenged, or in crisis and how you can take action today with one step. Whatever it is that you're going through, what's the first step that you can do to change it? And the next? And the next? You get the idea. Once you take your first step, there will always be a next step. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Hey, thank you.
What an inspiration Nick is and has been. As I commented earlier, he's a young man that I've known many years, and to watch him progress through this growth phase of his life, particularly over roughly the last 8 to 10 years, is fantastic. And Nick, thanks, buddy, and keep on stepping forward.